Committee meeting of May 19th to order at 1 p.m. And I want to note that this meeting is being held by Zoom, as we are allowed to continue to do because of recent legislative changes. Members of the public have access to the meeting via Zoom. And just want to remind everybody, as usual, that the meeting is being recorded. And so with that, let me just go through the members of the committee to make sure everybody can hear and be heard. Start with Anna Devlin Gauthier.
Present.
Lynn Griesmer.
Present.
Bob Hegner.
Present.
Matt Holloway.
Present.
Bernie Kubiak.
Present.
Kathy Shane.
Here.
And I'm here, and I think that Alicia is not here. Do you want to check on
I've already sent her a text.
and others from the council who are present? I think we do not yet constitute a quorum for the council, but I see Jennifer Taub. You can hear, I assume. Dorothy, Pam. Can you acknowledge, Dorothy?
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you. I have to.
I
I'm
think there's no one else from the council who's not on the committee who's present. So we can proceed, and there was a request that we begin with the council order FY 2410 to establish the water and sewer rates to be effective July 1, 2023. This was in the packet for the prior meeting, and it's been in the packet for previous meetings. We had information and presentation on water rates, and I don't think that anything has changed. And we had the presentation about the enterprise funds and the enterprise funds budget at our last meeting, and that was the same information that coincided. So I just want to see if there are any other questions about the water sewer rate proposal. And if not, then I'll make a motion.
Andy, this is maybe a question for Athena. Is Athena still here? She hopped off? Looks like she hopped off. So I can pull the order up if anybody wants to see it. I am noticing one little typo in the order, and it's related to the date of the memo, which I don't think is super important, but it's probably worth getting updating that. Do you want me to share it real quick so you guys can see what I'm talking about?
Since you may, under that circumstance.
Yeah, so it says effective July 1st, that's all correct, as recommended by the town manager in his memorandum to the town council dated May 2nd, 2023. I think I've got the memo here. This is the memo, so I think it should have said dated April 28th, 2023. Again, a minor change, but for accuracy's sake.
So I'm going to treat it as amended and make a motion that the finance committee recommend to the town council approval of council order 2410, an order setting the water and sewer rates to be effective July 1, 2023 as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
So is there any further questions or discussion regarding the motion that's on the floor? Since there's nothing, the vote is by members of the finance committee. Of course, this is other councilors will have the opportunity to consider this at our next meeting. So because this is a recommendation being made for the first June meeting, which is our next meeting. So let me just go through and ask for a vote. Anna?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye. Please note that Alicia has joined us.
Okay. let me pause for a moment. Alicia, hi. Can you hear?
Hi, Andy. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion on the floor has to do with water and sewer rates, which we discussed in previous meetings, but couldn't take up at the last meeting because it hadn't been placed on the agenda. It is on the agenda for this meeting. So the motion, and there was one slight amendment to the order just before you got on. You may have not heard it, therefore. There was just a date mistake as far as the date of memorandum that was referenced in it. So the motion was that the Finance Committee approve and recommend to the council adoption of Council Order 2410, order setting the water and sewer rates to be effective July 1, 2023 as amended. And the amendment is the correction of the date. So we've just started voting on that, and so I just wanted to bring you up to date. So we had 2 votes started in the cycle, and Anna and Lynn said yes. So Bob,
I support.
okay, Matt,
Support.
Bernie,
Support.
Kathy,
Yes.
I'm a yes, and Alicia.
Yes.
Okay, so motion is 5-0 for council members voting and support from 3 resident members. And with that, I'm going back to Sean, who's managing the order in which we're taking up sections of the budget. General funds, I believe, is first.
Yes. Yep. So the first department today is the town council. So there were some questions sent in by Bernie and by Kathy around that. So I'll just read them, and then Lynn or someone, maybe Paul, you want to hop in. Let's see. So the first question, Lynn, this is nice. I get to ask you questions. This is like a role reversal. It's nice. Are there ways for the town council to be more, and remember, I am not asking these questions, so however you perceive these questions, not me. Are there ways for the town council to be more efficient in terms of use of staff time based on the department heads and how much time they spend on council related activities?
There definitely are. This is something Kathy and others have discussed, and GOL is actually looking at rules of procedure. It specifically relates to how fast do we refer something, a bylaw, for example, a zoning bylaw, out for actual review versus send it first to a committee to look at. There's other ways to look at and then come back to the council after it's been reviewed and in many cases modified. An example of that is where we are doing that is the street lighting bylaw, which was referred to TSO, and it still has not come back to the council, but it has never gone out for any kind of zoning review, and not clear that it will. But the example that I think people are more concerned about was the fact that we immediately referred the duplex triplex bylaw for a hearing to CRC and to GOL, and to the planning board, without having a much more in-depth conversation at the committee level, which might have changed some of what was there. Whether it still would have prevented staff time is unclear. And I do note staff time the council uses is not budgeted in the town council's budget. It's budgeted in the department budgets, but it is something that I'm more than willing to discuss with the town manager as to how much we track it. And I also invite people to submit, as Andy has, language for our rules of procedure that would change some of that process. Sorry about my voice, but it's my allergies. So Kathy, you may want to say more, but that's I think there's ways to account for it, and I think there's ways to reduce it. And some of it is by agreeing to priorities and agreeing to process.
Thank you. If I don't, so if people have follow-up questions or any additional questions, just raise your hand and Andy or I will call on you.
Yeah, the only thing that I was going to add is that I've been thinking about raising essentially the same issue when we talked with conservation and development sections regarding the effect, the amount of time that is being required because of some of the work that the council's done, and just to get a sense from them on the same question.
Right.
Steve,
Andy,
you have your hand up.
I actually want to note that I need to call the town council to order. For the record, it should actually show probably about 1:10. And I just need to make sure that I believe we've already called on everybody. So, and then Dorothy has her hand up.
Yes. I did call on Dorothy. And Dorothy, go ahead.
On this topic, and Anna could correct me on this one. When we did the water and sewer, we had an organized process. We would discuss an area and then we would vote on it. I'm finding the duplex, triplex, and the big zoning thing to be so unwieldy that it's not even clear what's happening. No votes have been taken. It's huge, and it's going to be voted up or down. I think that it's really not a good way to go. And using the water and sewer rates, some of us on TSO were very clear that we wanted the town to cover the cost of replacing pipes. At this point, it did not win in terms of the vote. And so we were able to, what we passed on, what ended up happening was part of that was done. And it seemed to be, neat and rational, and one could follow it. Okay. Whereas right now, I don't think anyone can follow what's happening. And it's taking tremendous amount of time from the staff. And, it's not really up to the staff to say, hey, they have suggested that it could be referred to the planning staff, which I think is a good suggestion, because right now it's just like, I was just kneading some bread. If you have too big a piece of dough, it just sags all over the place. You can't get control of it. You can't shape it. You can't make a loaf. And I think the process we've been doing on the zoning is really wasteful of everybody's time, and will not result with what we want, which is an understanding of, yes, we're for this, but we're not for that, but whereas we were able to do that with the water and sewer. So that's my thoughts on that.
And Dorothy, just to further that, if it had been referred just to CRC to do a review and then come back to the council with whatever the revision was for a possible referral at that point for hearing, one would have assumed that a lot of the discussion would have taken place in that case, it would have been CRC, unless at some point TSO had to get involved. And that the bylaw that was brought then back to the council for referral for hearing would have had a lot more opportunity for input before we used up the hearing process. That's what I think many of us have felt on this particular one, myself included. We can't hear you, Dorothy.
Yeah.
There's a complication in that the planning board has also been,
Right.
it's just been a very unwieldy structure that goes round and round, and discussions are had, and it seems to be there's understanding on something, but no votes are taken anywhere.
Andy, can I make a, at the risk of maybe overstepping, I don't know if we want to have this discussion at this meeting, only because we have like 7 departments that are coming up, and this is I think Lynn, you mentioned this is a topic
This is
that,
a GOL discussion.
yeah,
It is.
not that it's not a good discussion to have. I see
Right.
the hands lining up, and I'm worried we're gonna go over time quickly.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I was thinking similarly. Anna had her hands up but has taken it down. So Kathy?
I was going to say the same thing Sean did and clarify that the process, TSO didn't formally vote on every aspect. We did kind of a straw poll in my recollection, but same comment that Sean had. Thanks.
Kathy?
Yeah, I'm totally ready to move on. And my question, it kind of runs through the others as well. I have a sense of, we have a very short staff at the critical town staff level in finance and other departments. So trying to think of, as we get to the other, you'll see my questions where I worry about where I want to make sure we use scarce resources well, would be the best way to say this. Yeah.
So let me just respond to that from a council perspective. And that is that, you know, as we become a more mature council and gotten to know people in town hall, I think sometimes we've forgotten that we are in fact supposed to go through Paul to access town for research or anything else. And one of the things that we need to do with all of our priorities, if you will, is look at what town staff are going to have to get involved in, whether they have the bandwidth to take it on.
That's the larger point, Lynn. So as we go through the others as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the last question is sort of along those lines. There were some comments, but I'll just do the questions for today. Should there be a longer discussion at the outset of creating goals regarding budget constraints and the need to make difficult choices or trade-offs?
Absolutely. I mean, I can expand on that. I think we're seeing it now when we get to the 23rd and we have to start making any kind of recommendations to change what the town manager has recommended. The sharp and harsh words people are going to have to hear is, yes, you'd like to increase that or get rid of that, but at the cost of what? And, you know, it is what it is. We only have so much money. So these are all questions around how can the council, frankly, behave better?
And I think that there's one other element that I will bring up at appropriate times that I don't want to discuss now, is that as we propose things, that we recognize the staff time required to implement it if passed, and that we take some responsibility for considering what the cost is, both in staff time and in the ability to proceed. Just so Bernie, and then I want to get back.
Yeah, just you're going to hear it from me later as well. It's been something I've mentioned, I think repeatedly, that we're too thin. And I think Lynn's point about staff behavior, that you really need to go through channels, even though you might know somebody in some department, is one that that's a good one. I mean, there's the formal table of organization, and then there's the way things really work. And at some point, they should kind of line up. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Bernie. Sean, back to you.
So that's it for sort of submit written council questions. Again, there were some additional comments that I'll send out when we send out the updated question document. But any final questions for town council's budget?
Can I just mention that I worked with Athena directly on this budget and with Paul, and we had 2 reviews with Sean and Paul and Holly and Athena and myself. I even said to Athena, I said, do you want to request any additional help? And we pretty much agreed no, but I do want to note that she is going to have an intern this fall, which is really nice. Dorothy has her hand up. Athena also has her hand up now.
Okay, Athena.
Just wanted to note that the intern isn't coming out of the council budget, and the extra help I'd like to sort of leave on the back burner, because I do need extra help, frankly, but I recognize that it's just not going to be possible in this budget.
Right. Thank you, Athena.
Dorothy, is there anything else on this? Because we need to move on.
But this is probably the wrong place, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to miss it again. There was a mention at a previous meeting of a revolving fund for babysitting costs for people at committees, and that can include council members. And then I remember I was told that there was something in the works to increase the council pay. And I remember being told it was only going to cover a part of the year, but if this is a council budget, shouldn't there be something in this one?
So that's hasn't been
it-
approved or discussed at the council level yet. So, and it wouldn't have been by the time the town manager had submitted his budget proposal. I think Andy, you've noted in the, if that is approved before July 1, it would be half a year that we would have to figure it out.
The
essentially.
child care money is in the budget. It's
It's
just
in the-
not in
yeah.
this council budget.
It's in
You'll
the
hear about
town
that in a
manager
second, yeah.
budget.
And,
The
and
town
and that
council's
could be
work is-
done without the council vote because it's actually a practice we've had in the past.
Mhm.
Okay. The other two questions about pay and counselor pay and and ability to have health insurance are
Mhm.
still on in the finance committee and have been delayed, hoping to get the teacher and other contracts settled, but if not, we will take it up in June.
Okay, just want to make sure that that my keeping my mouth shut doesn't mean, oh, we missed it again. That's all I'm trying to.
It's not been dropped.
Okay, great.
at all.
Thank you. Thank you.
So back to Sean then. Let's move to the town manager budget.
All right. So heading to the town manager budget. Again, we've just been doing questions and answers. So Paul, are you ready?
I am, and
Okay.
Brianna and Angela are here too.
Okay. So this is sort of a technical question. Your number of staff have decreased. You went from 4 staff members to 3. Has the workload intensified, or have there been opportunities to streamline?
The workload continues to intensify. As you recall, when we created the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, we took the halftime position from the town manager's budget that had been shared halftime with HR and halftime with town manager, and moved that as the assistant director of DEI. We took the economic development director position and made that the DEI director position. And that was in an effort to minimize increasing staff. And I know we talk about increasing staff, but that's something we've been really holding back on as much as possible, because that's the major cost center for us as we move as an organization, that those expenses once included into budget don't let up. We are short-staffed in the town manager's office. You know, we are experiencing more and more frequently where we don't have someone on the floor on the mezzanine level to answer the phone, to greet people. Today we had to lock the office just because there wasn't anybody on the floor. So we're experiencing that kind of lack of coverage sometimes. But typically someone's here, so we try to manage it as best we can.
So the town manager had a 25% increase in operating expenses. How much of this is attributable to CPOs, stipends for CPOs, and the child care pilot?
Okay, so when we create the charter requires us to have a CPO position. When I looked at that, when the charter passed, we had 3 super talented people who were really phenomenal employees that I asked them each to take on a piece of it, and they all willingly did. They were never truly compensated for this. And if we were to move to a different model, we don't have anything budgeted. So $15,000 of that would equate to about $5,000 for each CPO at the way we have it set up now, is what we have budgeted in the increase. The other $5,000 is for the childcare pilot. And so the childcare pilot, the question was raised, is for all elected officials. That would include the Board of Library Commissioners, so we call them, the school committee, and the Amherst Town Council. And we have it sort of set up the way it would be with if the council approves this, the way town meeting used to do it. So if you had childcare expenses, you would submit those expenses to the manager's office, and we'd reimburse you for those expenses.
Lynn?
Yeah, I don't want it to go unnoticed that many times the CPOs and also particularly Angela, do what I would think of as council work. And so that it's really, we really appreciate that. It should be recognized. For instance, Angela is often the one trying to pull together a meeting that includes the town manager and other people. So it's saying that we only have a portion of Athena first is false, and saying that we don't have any other assistance is also false. So I want to take the opportunity to thank them for that, and also to acknowledge it for everyone else. Thank you.
Ernie?
Yeah, the other piece of that question was why childcare and not family care? Because number of
No,
people have may have family members who need to have some level of assistance while they're absent.
No, we would expand. You're right, Bernie, on that. That was just an oversight on my part when I wrote it. It should have included, elderly or disabled family member care as well.
Okay, and there's nothing in the budget that would allow us to pay for cloning Athena. I think that needs to be remedied. Maybe UMass can assist with that. Who knows? Thank you.
Thanks.
So the next question, it's a longer question, but in short, Paul, it's about the number of department heads that you oversee, and your plan to maybe address that.
Yeah, so this was brought up in my performance review by the council as a concern. We are doing a compensation and classification study right now for department heads, and with the information that that firm collects, I am anticipating putting some reorganization work in this summer, working with our department heads and maybe submitting something in the fall to the council. That's the goal. And I think the span of control is pretty broad. Direct reports are too many, and trying to streamline that in a slightly more hierarchical fashion would be helpful for the town.
Okay, this again is one of my gripes, pet peeves, whatever. Welcome that planning, Paul. In the meantime, please don't get hit by a bus.
Okay, go to the next one. So Paul, 2 new working groups have been proposed. The school fiscal sustainability working group, and then the economic task force. Are there any funds in the operating budget to meet these, help support these activities, and what are the prospects for an economic development coordinator in the future?
Yeah, so for the internal working group, that won't start quite not yet, because the finance director for the school department has been named the acting superintendent. So he and Sean are the key figures in that group.
It's actually going to streamline decision making. It's going to be a lot easier.
So again, the mission on this is to be completed by the end of the calendar year. So hopefully we'll see how that works out. But Doug is a key part of that, as is Mike, quite honestly. So there's a little bit of a monkey wrench in that one. So, but it's something that has to be done. In terms of the economic development task force, I'm anticipating that we'll have some funding allocated for this to help support the economic development work. The task force itself won't have a budget, but it'll involve people from the university, the colleges, the business community, and others who would be involved in looking at this. We don't have a funded position, and most likely this would probably fall to Dave Zomack or someone in his team to help support.
I think that is.
There's one more. I think.
Oh yeah, there's a couple more. Sorry. Or yeah, one more about the Comcast contract, which is up for negotiations. Is there funding in the law budget account to accommodate these negotiations, and will KP Law assist, or will it be necessary to hire outside counsel?
Right now, we're planning on using KP Law. They do have someone who does cable contracts on staff. In the end of this, in 2024, I think, is when we start the what's it called? Ascertainment process. Yeah. So it's a lead up to the contract negotiations. And so it's a pretty lengthy project. Auntie was pretty intimate with it last time. So there's two things that have to be negotiated. One is the license agreement with Comcast. And then once that is completed, there's the companion agreement with whoever is going to be providing the services for PEG services, and that right now is Amherst Media.
And that is it for town manager questions. Any other town manager questions? Anybody in the committee? Kathy?
Kathy?
I don't have another question, but this is my section of the finance of our budget review to write up. So Sean, as you're getting answers, but also you're getting the questions, if you can just compile the questions for me, because some of these aren't questions I sent in, just so I can capture the information we've collected.
Yeah, I have all the questions and I'll send them out. I sent a version last week, and there will be another updated version with the new questions that have gone out. I don't have most of them. I have written responses for if we have them in enough time, but I don't have written responses for all if they were just answered at the meeting.
Yeah, no, and I'm not even asking, because I can
Okay.
always the Zoom. I just need to know what the question.
Yeah, I have. I'll send those out. Yep, for sure.
Thanks.
Any other town manager questions? Okay, then okay to move to the next section, Andy?
Go for it.
So the next section is my section, or finance section, and we have, so finance has really three key department heads who handle all the day-to-day work and, really are the ones that help give finance such a good reputation. And that's Jennifer LaFountain, who's our treasurer collector, Kim Yu, who's our principal assessor, and Holly Drake, who's on vacation this week, but most of you know Holly Drake, she's our comptroller. So they will help answer some of the questions that have been raised if applicable. Kim or Jen, either of you want to say anything? You don't have to, but if there's anything you wanted to say, now's a good time. Okay. All right, so the first question, is staffing adequate? Is staffing adequate? I think is the first question, and I'll, Jen or Kim, if you want to go first, you can, otherwise I'll jump in.
I think we just finally got back up to full staff, so we are, I think we're in pretty good shape for right now. We're in a little transition with training, but other than that, I think we're in good shape.
Probably the same for you, Kim, right?
Yes, I was just going to say we have someone retiring momentarily and have filled that spot already, as well as the other part-time position that we have. So I think we're in pretty good shape other than just getting up and running and training.
Yeah, I think I can speak for accounting a little bit. Generally, I think the staffing is adequate when we're at full strength and everyone has been trained and knows their position well. We've gone through a lot of transition, mostly due to retirements, as you all know. But even before Sonia, we had a chain of retirements, and so we're slow. I think we're nearing the end of that period of transition. We've got one more position to fill in the office. That's sort of a critical position that we have to provide training for. And then we still have a few people that are in their first year or two in their position. So a lot of our efforts in this coming year around training and support for those individuals. But again, when we're fully staffed and when everyone feels comfortable in their role, staffing I think is adequate.
I do have to recognize that there is a whole new team in the finance department for the most part. They've over 100 years worth of experience walked out the door in the last few months, and for retirements. And so it's really good that they've been pretty diligent about recruiting really good people, and but it's the training and getting people up to speed, and losing all that institutional knowledge is going to take some time.
Mm-hmm. Kathy?
Yeah, I asked, one I put in specific, Sean, is we have just one procurement officer, and I'm, if we're going along at kind of a steady state, I could see one doing it. But if we hit a lot of road contracts coming out, then we're also doing Centennial Plant. And then I don't know, as we start to do the school a year from now, where we're actually got, so I'm just, and the person's relatively new. So it's a question of relative new, but also just one. So it's a sense that you'll be able to manage that as what I see a crunch.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So Simone Christopher, she's our procurement officer, and she is incredibly organized. She's been a real asset in that role from an organization standpoint. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Kathy. there's parts of the year where one person is fine and she can help out and back up other departments. And then there's times where it's kind of straight out, and that's just the nature of how we do procurement, especially with, you know, a 5-year capital plan where all the funds become available on July 1st. You know, there's sort of a crunch in the late summer, fall to get all those projects awarded. I will say, again, given her organization, a lot of the times the crunch isn't necessarily with procurement. It's the crunch is with, when we have lots of funds, the specifications that have to be created for projects are really the time consuming piece. You know, roads may seem straightforward, but they have to be designed and all the details have to be worked out. Again, I would say the specification development piece is the most time consuming part of a procurement. And often that is not, more often than not, that's not Simone doing that. That's the department doing it. So I think that's the area we would look at to try to push things through. And what we've been talking about, we allocated some funds for a capital projects manager from ARPA. We have not been able to find someone to fill that role. And so one thing we're looking to do as sort of an alternate that actually I think might work better is look to get an architect or an owner project manager on contract, essentially, to handle multiple projects, to be available for departments to contact for some of these small, medium-sized projects, to help them develop the specifications more rapidly and be able to push more through. So we're going to be looking to do that hopefully in the next month or two. And then the other piece is for some of these big projects, like you noted, we can rely on our OPMs and architects for those projects to handle a lot of the procurement. So for example, with the MSBA, the nice thing about the MSBA is it's such a prescribed process that we don't actually have a lot to do with it. We have, you know, we have to update and get all the information in, but their documents are so standardized that there's not a lot for us to do. So your question's a good one. I think there is a lot of procurement going on, and there's different ways we can help it ease through the process faster.
Thank you.
The next question that we sort of addressed, you talked about turnover and the ability to attract and keep highly qualified, experienced staff. I think the good news is we've been able to attract and retain staff, which has been nice. We do have, as Paul mentioned, several new staff, but we've been really happy. We were nervous when we went out to hire because it's been such a tight job market, but we've been really satisfied with the people that we've brought in and our ability to kind of incorporate them as part of the team. And we do have because finance, accounting, collectors, and the assessors, we all kind of work in one big office. It's really critical that everyone works well together and gets along and can back each other up and feel supportive. And I think everybody on the team can do that. Kim or Jen, I don't know if you feel differently, hopefully not, but it seems like everyone's meshing well. They're going to say I'm the one that's kind of thrown everything off. Good. Kim, Jen, anything you want to add to that? Okay. Jen, I'm going to let you start with this one. There's a question about ambulance billing collection rates and just how they're sort of historically, you know, we generally have really high collection rates, but ambulance billing is one of those that just historically is low. When we did it in-house, it was low. We've contracted it out. It's still low. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. But do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I think it's kind of a tricky thing to track because there's so many different variables that go in as far as certain insurances cover a certain amount, and then there's a copay for the patient, or in the instance of Medicare or Medicaid, there's large write-offs that happen on the different charges. So I think we're going through a ground ambulance support review that's nationwide in hopes to increase the Medicare rates. So that way everybody's seeing a little more money coming in on those bills at some point. Once it's going to take, I think, 3 to 5 years to get that done nationwide.
And then the other piece of it is we have a very transient population in terms of, you know, UMass students come in or college students come in and then they leave. And it's not always simple to track down an overdue bill.
So that when you show collection rate, then you're saying if you bill for $500 and you only get 300, you're showing that in the rate so that that's part of what goes into this computation. I just thought it was literally we didn't collect anything on 30% of the bills, but it's computed. I didn't know what the accounting system was. That was my question, you know, on it. We have a 70% collection rate in 2022.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and we use Comstar so again, we used to do it in-house. We thought contracting out might boost up the rate, but it actually stayed about the same. Or did it get better or worse when we went outside with it?
I don't, it may have got better a little bit, but I don't think it's improved enough to be
Yeah.
impressed with.
Okay. Bernie?
I'm just curious if any of the insurance companies have attempted the old trick of paying the policy owner rather than the ambulance department, our ambulance department. There's one question. The other question is it, does it look like we might ever get to the point where we'd have to take some people to small claims court to collect ambulance fees when there's no insurance, no primary payer other than the person who's transported?
That's a good question. We haven't, we right now we use a collection agency. So any bills that are over a certain point, we've been moving on to Greg Hill as our collection agency. They just got bought out, so we have to do some research with the new company. But we're actively trying to recoup as much as we can with that. And the answer about paying the patient, I have seen that over the time I've been here, where, example, Blue Cross will send the full check to the patient and not send it to us, and then we have to work with them to get it back.
So the
Yep.
Blues are still doing that. Okay. Unfortunately, thank you.
The good news is overall, the ambulance fund has been doing, it obviously dropped off a little bit during the pandemic, but we have seen it rebound, and this one has rebounded pretty quickly, especially because we increased rates right before the pandemic. So, so there's room to improve, but it is doing pretty well. And then the last question here is about parking permits, and is the new system pricing working as expected, yielding more money? And the answer is yes. So the third quarter report will come out. It's almost done, so we should be able to get out to you the next week or so. So you'll see the sort of year-over-year comparison, but the town center permits definitely brought in quite a bit more money this year. And Jen actually is working on the notice for next year, which phases in the next piece of the permit system pricing updates, which it goes up another chunk next year. It was a 3-year plan that we worked out to phase in the new pricing. The first year was the biggest chunk, so the biggest, the biggest step up is already complete, but there'll be another step up for FY24. Bob?
Yeah, if there aren't any other questions, I just had a question. The federal debt ceiling negotiations may result in a clawback of unspent COVID funds. Do we have a sense of how much we might be at risk for? I know this is all up in the air right now, but I think we ought to be cognizant of that, the possibility that these funds might be clawed back.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So there's a couple things. If the debt ceiling negotiations, depending on how they go, if there's some sort of shutdown, that could impact the town and the schools, particularly through grants that are not, there's certain types of grants that are subject to annual appropriations that the money might stop flowing for those grants. And so that's one concern. The other piece, I was at a conference on Wednesday about the possible clawbacks. And Andy, you actually know this person well, Jackie Lavender Bird, who's the legislative analyst for MMA. I actually asked her that very question, Bob, if MMA had been hearing anything. Her response was that what they've been hearing is that the federal level, they've been looking more at trying to claw back. They originally started with some of the COVID relief funds, but recently they've been turning more towards the Inflation Reduction Act, which is also not good for us, because Kathy knows, because some of the, we're also hoping to get some funding back from the Inflation Reduction Act related to the school project. So if any clawbacks or changes in the law happen there, that would also not be good for us. But if there were, with the ARPA funds, and ESSER funds, I don't know about for ESSER because I don't, the schools would have to answer that. But with ARPA, we've got about $4 million that we've obligated. We have about 7 million left that hasn't been technically obligated. Now we have plans for those funds, and we'll be coming to you all to share a plan. But what I'll say, Paul and I are still working on this, but there may be a mechanism to get it all obligated quickly that we might share with you that would not, it would essentially give the council maybe more control over those funds, but it would get it obligated so it's no longer ARPA money, so that we could say it's all taken essentially. We're gonna have to really do a lot of communication and communication around that, because some people may feel like it's not what it was meant for, but at the risk of losing the funds, I think we want to do what we can to make sure we don't lose any of those funds. So we'll communicate that and explain give more details. But essentially with ARPA, every community was allowed to take a sort of a flat $10 million revenue loss if they wanted to. Originally, before all this conversation started around clawing back, we were going to use some revenue loss, but we were going to try to dedicate as much for projects as possible. But given the talk around this, we may want to do this revenue loss piece, which again doesn't lose the money. It just it takes a different form that the council would then have to appropriate. So nothing set in stone there. Paul and I again will be back to talk with you all about that. That's one option we're considering, but it's for that very reason that you noted, Bob, which is we don't want to, we're concerned about that as well.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on finance? I think that's all the ones that were submitted. There's some other questions about benefits and utilities that I'll weigh in on when we get to those sections, but all right. So our next department is human resources. Melissa, do you want Kay brought in the room as well, or she's in
Yeah,
the audience?
Kay.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Kay does have the link. I think she's on the phone right now, but she'll be joining us.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
So I don't know if everyone's met Melissa. Melissa's our new human resources director. She's doing a great job. She's managing the office through a transition right now and holding down the fort. And so I think I sent these questions to you, but I'll just read them off, Melissa, and then you can address them.
Sure, absolutely.
So the first question is, has there been a high staff turnover rate? And I don't know if it wasn't clear if this is specific to just the human resources department, or the town more broadly. I would say probably the town more broadly would cover both. And what's the current status in terms of what you're seeing in staff turnover?
I would say that there's been a turnover rate consistent with what we see in all industries right now. It's more than what we've seen in the past. We see a couple come and a couple go, I'd say a month. And I think that's consistent with all industries. So, in HR, that just means a little bit of an uptick in our usual work. So we've been doing a lot of onboarding, a lot of recruitment and stuff like that. And I'm sorry, what was the second piece of that?
No, I think that addressed it. The current status of staff turnover.
And I think we're going to be seeing this for a little bit. I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
Bob?
I have a kind of related question, which is what new staff are we looking for in the future? I mean, one of the thoughts is we might have to increase CRES, the staffing for CRES. So what are some of the things that you're looking at in terms of additional staff beyond what we have now, more, irrespective of the turnover, that we might have to budget for into the future?
Are you speaking about new positions or replacements?
New positions.
I think we have had a lot of requests from departments for new positions across the board, and includes water, sewer. Every department literally has come in, including CRES. But I think we just don't have the capacity to take on new positions, and so that's sort of where we're stuck right now. And we've added the 10 positions in the CRES department. We've added the 4 positions in the fire department. But Sean, would you say pretty much every department has asked for additional staffing?
Well, finance hasn't asked for additional staff.
I haven't asked for additional staffing.
I just said that, but to your point, there were many requests: sustainability, public works, technology. We see a potential need around cybersecurity. So there are a lot of requests for new positions that are very valuable new positions that would be helpful. But to Paul's point, we're taxing as much as we can. We're looking for all the revenues we can. Um, and so unless there's some sort of change that results in more revenue, adding more staff is a struggle, especially right now given inflation, because we get so much new money every year, and the first thing we have to do is cover insurances and the outcome of collective bargaining agreements and so on. And then when we look at what's left over to potentially do new things, that number has been shrinking the last few years. Lynn?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I've been very clear that before we make any commitment to increasing CREST, we need to see the evaluations. And I think that we need to have a priority as we look at the budget for the coming year to understand what some of these unmet needs are in other departments as well. We just don't have an unlimited budget, and everybody wants something.
Bernie?
Yeah, there also seems to be a prevailing belief that any money for CREST will come out of the police department. In real life, when you've had community response departments operating, there's been some relief of the workload on the police, but nothing that would be of such significance that you could reduce the police budget by 50%, which is a number that's been kicked around and frankly, in my humble opinion, was pulled out of the air. We're going to have to be very careful of going forward. And folks are also going to have to take into account the fact that some of these positions that aren't necessarily public facing are pretty important. We can't expect to sustain our public services, our public safety, our public health unless there's adequate support behind that. That means folks in the back office, because there's lots of work that has to go on to keep those town employees who are in the field. End of sermon. Thank you.
Kathy?
Yeah, this is jumping forward a little bit to another department when we get to town facilities, but I just don't know whether it's come up at the Melissa level. When we have a brand new school that's all electric with geothermal and solar, we have a school with much more sophisticated HVAC system than anything we've got now. And as we do similar kinds of changes in the town hall and town buildings, so I'm trying to think forward, will there be a need for a high level facility person with a technical expertise that works across school, town, library, so that each of those doesn't have to have the capacity? I saw this in Springfield. They have, well, it's a much bigger urban area, but just trying to think about that as Jeremiah and then Rupert, what they will be facing. And in one case, it's not till 2026, but we're going to be getting it in some of these others. So it's just something to be thinking about, not so much a new staff, but trying to think about where that kind of staff person is. And then it's a shared resource. So we don't tend to budget that way with these departments. You're in a department rather than working the big departments, the big ones, not, Sean's finance where everyone works together. Yeah. So that's a looking forward kind of question.
Yeah, just the likelihood of the town finding a person who can do that, it would be great if we could. My guess is it's going to be very difficult to find somebody with those types of expertise that could work solely for the town. But to your point, we will definitely need maintenance. If we can't, we will need maintenance contracts. We will need things in place that have professionals that do that type of work. But again, just knowing at the schools where we employed a number of specialists like plumbers and electricians and carpenters, it's the private sector, especially for those types of positions, is much more advantageous, and so it's difficult to find people like that to work for the municipal side.
Thanks.
So the next question, Melissa, is about just giving an update on the market wage study.
Excuse me. Yes, we've gotten pretty far. We've had our initial employee meeting with our consultant, who is GovHR. Backtracking, an RFP went out in January, and they were awarded the bid. That's coming out of our capital request, our FY23 capital request budget of $40,000, and the contract amount was $25,800. So anyhow, GovHR has met with us. They've given all of the employees the lowdown about what we're doing, how we're doing it. The employees were given a job analysis questionnaire to answer questions about the work that they do in their positions. They were then given to the supervisors to review, and they've all been submitted now. Interviews with employees, one-on-one with the consultant, will begin on Monday. There are 5 people working with all of our non-union members to complete those with next week. Also, our surveys, our salary surveys, have gone out to our 21 comparable communities, and we hope that they will answer. I know that at least 3 of them have sent me a copy of what they submitted. It's going right to a survey engine, so I haven't seen who's answered yet. But I think that's progressing pretty well, and I think we'll have some initial recommendations by the beginning of or early part of FY24.
Thank you.
Lynn?
Yeah, just a question on the salary comps. Are you taking into consideration, when you look for comparable towns, what the cost of living is in that area of the state? And to be honest with you, with housing prices so high in Amherst, we start looking a little bit like at least a Mid-Eastern Massachusetts, that, you know, might be a far-reaching bedroom community for Boston. But I just wanted to make sure that we do at least consider that issue of some places are just more expensive to live.
We are considering location, cost of living, average salary. We are even thinking about looking at, well, we have asked a few communities with universities, state colleges, to also answer. But you know, we have them prioritized with most comparable, which what we think is most comparable, and then others. But yeah, we have looked at a lot of factors, including that cost of living.
In reality, the university basically pays similar across the state, so it doesn't take into consideration where you live in the state. That's just an aside and a caution.
Thank you.
And then the last question is about collaborating with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that work has been going.
Yeah, I've enjoyed collaborating with that office. We actually were able to do 2 trainings together at our first professional day event, and we'll continue to collaborate in that way. And I've worked very closely with them, and will continue to work with them on the hiring process, recruitment, and how to make it better, shore it up, how to increase our pool of diverse candidates. And I've been working with the assistant director on that pretty closely. And so, yeah, I'm enjoying that partnership, and I think it's fruitful.
And we'll have the same question for Pamela in a few minutes. So. Any other questions for human resources?
I just wanted to thank Melissa publicly. She came in at a difficult time, has endured some staff turnover, some pretty intense labor negotiations that's been going on. It just ramped up this week again. So just sort of powered through everything. So just really thank you, Melissa.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, this is more a question for you than to Melissa, which is why I was waiting till the end. As I was looking through this budget and then thinking about the other budgets, I realized that what we've been doing by listing under personnel services for each department the salaries, but leaving the benefits into one general fund under general services. that we don't always reflect the full cost of the department because we're leaving such a large part of compensation into a separate reporting mechanism. And so it probably affects different departments differently because a department where the salaries are relatively lower than the percentage that's going to be in the benefits side of compensation is going to be higher. But for future budgets, not for this budget, but for future budgets, I wonder if that top section in each budget where we talk about um, personnel services, operating expenses, and operating capital, whether we should be looking at what we can do to make sure that we're really looking at the full cost of each department. So why don't we put that?
Yeah, no, and that was a question that was submitted, so I can address that one now. So we could take a look at how to include that. It used to be included. What I'll say is the spreadsheet or the budget as it is now, if you add up all the different department pages, it adds up to our total budget, as you would expect it to. And in reality, from an accounting perspective, we don't track health insurance by department. We have a health insurance account, and I think that's how it was at the schools as well. We don't. We would have lots of nightmarish accounting situations if we were to track it by every department. So we just have one account, for active health insurance, another account for retiree health insurance, and so on. We do have spreadsheets where we could translate that to department benefit costs if need be, and we could put it on those budget pages. But again, I would almost put it as like a pro forma, like below the line type thing, because we're still going to have an employee benefit section where you're going to want to see what is the overall cost of health insurance and how is it changing. It can sometimes, when you break it into granular by department, you can sometimes lose the full picture of our employee benefit costs because one person decides they're not going to get benefits that year and it looks like health insurance is going down, or somebody decides they're going to take health insurance and it's going to go up, and it looks like it's a really big increase. And sometimes, we try to not talk about individual health insurance decisions of employees. You're not really supposed to tie any decisions to somebody's right to choose health insurance. And when we have some small departments where it becomes pretty clear, pretty obvious when you see a big jump in health insurance. So that's why I moved away from it. And I think ultimately the most important thing is that global number and what we see happening there, because it smooths out sort of the ins and outs. But to your point, we could do something to try to provide a little more context around that.
And I've been in communities that have done it both ways, Andy, as you know. And what happens is that it's harder to analyze a department budget when you include that, because just as Sean said, if someone suddenly starts taking a family health plan, it just catapults that budget up. If it's a small department, you go like, why is this budget suddenly going up? It's not true. You're not able to compare it to the prior years. And the thing that the council or the budget makers usually care about most about is what does health insurance cost us as a question. If we want to get into what do departments cost as a true sort of enterprise function, we can do that. But in terms of the decision-making process for this council and appropriating budget, I think this is a cleaner way to do it because you can really compare year-to-year operations of a budget of a department.
Okay, well, thank you. And as I said, I really didn't think that this was one that I wanted to go into depth today because I think we're talking about a next year budget presentation question, which is
it was a question actually that was submitted by probably Kathy. So it was you guys were thinking alike. Kathy?
Yeah, so, and when I think I asked it last year in the year, I may have asked it every year, but maybe the first time I saw the budget book. So I wasn't thinking down to the fine grain. I was thinking more at the total school budget. When we show just the wage part, we haven't showed the personnel part. So if we had the fringes, if we had health and pension, people would see we are a people organization and that's what's driving our budget. So And so, Sean, I wasn't, down to the 2-person department or the 5-person department doesn't make any sense to me for all the reasons you've just said, including pensions are somewhat more related to the level of the wages. So just thinking of some way of not having it, the first time I opened the budget book, I said, where's health insurance? I would, to have to search for it, and pensions. So it might be sort of a simple table someplace that you show it in those initial things where you're not redoing your whole.
Yeah, no, we could definitely do that. We could put it in the staffing section. There's a staffing summary. We do a little bit of that during the financial indicators presentation. There's a chart that looks at sort of benefit costs, personnel, salary, and benefit costs. But I don't know if we do anything where we roll in the schools as well, which we could do because their budgets allow for that. So we could do something like, our overall budget is $90 million, and of that, 60 or whatever is pension, health insurance, and salaries. So yeah, we could do that for next year.
Yeah, and I just think it's important because it's particularly since health insurance is one of the bugaboos. It has been always going up faster. It's a bigger share of everything, but you want to know where's the money going. So it's a way of saying add another 15% or another whatever ours is, for the town. Because it's also one of the things that attracts people to work at the town of Amherst. I mean, it's a good thing that we have the benefits that we do. So I'll stop. Some simple way, not down to the, small where one family plan versus one individual plan will skew it one way or the other.
Bob?
Yeah, I was just going to add, it would be helpful to see this summary over time, in the 5-year projections, because it's really important to know where all these expenses are going, especially since they are probably a majority of what we spend our money on. So
yeah, we have all that historical data where we could show a 5-year, up through what we're budgeting for the following year.
I'm sure you do. I just think it would be very helpful because, for example, when I was looking at, the employee benefits, there was no pension there. I had to go look at the assessment for pension, which is fine.
Yeah,
but
that's just that's a structural decision the town had made a while back where we weren't going to charge pension costs to the operating budgets, and so yeah, it's just a structure. But I get your point. Where it's not all in one place.
Yeah, it's not all in one place. It would be helpful if it were all in one place, just so people could see it.
I think that's the only request for new information for next year so far. So I'm going to just make sure I write that down. Any other questions for human resources?
I had one other, and there may not be a simple answer to this, but for the employee benefits, writ large, what percentage of the cost is borne by the town versus the employee?
Do you want me to take that, Melissa, or do you want to go ahead?
Yes, John, if you could speak to that.
So for health insurance, and Kay here, correct me if I get this backwards, but for HMOs, it's 75-25 split, and for PPOs, it's an 80-20 split. And the unique thing, not unique thing, but one of the, again, benefits of working for Amherst is that we maintain that split into retirement. Many communities, when you retire, they drop to a lower allocation, but Amherst maintains that. So that's just something to know.
Thank you.
Is that retaining of that something that's negotiated in contracts?
That's a good question. I don't believe it's in the collective bargaining agreements explicitly, but
no, it's not. It's not.
So, but we do have people move to Medicare when they are of age, right?
Yeah,
Right.
As soon as somebody, we try to move people to Medicare as soon as they're eligible, and we actually, one of the programs that we implemented, I think this past year, with the help of Maya, was the sort of the even if they missed the original opportunity to go into Medicare, we moved them over and we're paying the penalty. But it's financially more advantageous for us to pay the penalty and get them into Medicare than the alternative. And so that saved us quite a bit of money this past year.
And we're also paying a share of either a share or all of the Part B premium, which is a big benefit.
Yeah, we have generous retiree benefits, which is one of the, again, it's one of the hard things when we're recruiting. I think fewer and fewer people nowadays look to the retiree benefits as part of the compensation package, but it really is on the municipal side, one of the, and particularly in Amherst, it's one of it's a huge component of their compensation that we offer, and trying to help them understand that is a challenge that Melissa has. So.
What
Yep.
is, how
Okay.
many years must you be with the town to be vested?
I think Kay had raised her hand. She can probably answer all these questions. Kay?
Um, you have to have 10 years of service to be vested with the retirement system. And unfortunately, we have no vesting requirement with the town itself. And to be eligible to retire with benefits, it's the vesting with the retirement system. So occasionally, and they used to see it a lot in the schools when they were doing the school lunch folks that would come from another community and not have retirement benefits for health insurance. And they would come to Amherst to do a couple of years and then retire from Amherst. Because if you accept a provision of the law for health insurance for retirees, the mandate is that you must pay at least 50% once you've accepted that section of the law. Historically, Amherst has treated their retirees the same as active employees, and and people pay the same when they retire as they do as an active employee. And we
Thank
did,
you.
to answer the question about Medicare, we reimburse part of the Medicare Part B premium. We're required by state law, if we enroll people in Medicare Part A, we have to pay the Part A premium if they don't have it for free, and we have to pay any penalties associated with enrollment into Medicare. So if there are any penalties on either A or B, we're on the hook for that. But as Sean said, it does save us considerable money in our healthcare costs. So it's probably well worth it.
Bernie?
Yeah, the classic trade-off with for public employees is that you get better retirement benefits at the end rather than a higher salary through the year. And I would strongly encourage the town to continue the retirement benefits. You also have to keep in mind that if you have Social Security, you've earned Social Security, and you then retire on a state pension, you get hit with what's called a WEP, a windfall elimination provision, which can cost you 2/3 of your Social Security benefits. So that's another reason to help people out by giving them better health insurance in retirement.
And I'll just quickly add that retiree health insurance costs are one of our rising cost areas. They have been for a while. People living longer is probably the major reason why, which is a good thing. But it is an area that's going up, and then in addition with the cost of health insurance rising so rapidly. The silver lining is that our Medicare costs haven't actually risen that much. We've had our premium increases for Medicare plans have been relatively low, pretty much flat for several years, which has been helpful. But this is exactly why we contribute to our OPEB trust fund and why we continue to make contributions. Our OPEB trust fund's up over $10 million. We've got a ways to go. But that's why we continue to make those contributions, so that at some point that fund will be able to generate some returns and actually help alleviate some of the pressure on the operating budget from health insurance, from retiree health insurance. All right, any final questions on human resources? Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Good to see you.
So Pamela Young is up next. Hi, Pam. How are you?
Hello, everyone.
So we had a couple questions, Pamela, that I will relay. So the first one is, how will the two-person or how is the two-person department working from the staff perspective? How often are you teaming with other departments like HR, police, CRES, working with community participation officers, and lastly, working with community partners like UMass or Amherst College?
So the office is working very well with all of the internal departments, particularly as you heard with HR, but also with CRES. We've done a couple of events together. One of the objectives of the office is to work with every department on their DEI initiatives. In the I guess early winter, we did send out a DEI survey and assessment to try to start to get a read on what those initiatives will be. As we're beginning to go around and do training with each of the departments, we'll also have an opportunity to talk to them about their DEI initiatives. We have worked, made contacts with both Hampshire College, Amherst College, and UMass. I think the strongest connection has been with Amherst College, which has provided funding for a number of the cultural events that the office has supported.
Thank you. And I'll give a staff perspective. I've been to a couple of Pamela's trainings and events so far. I think the two things I would describe them as is accessible. They do a really great job of providing different ways to engage with the work, and interactive. They're not, sit back and listen to a 1 hour or go through a 1 hour PowerPoint. You're engaged and you're talking with people and working through pretty tough topics, but in a way that doesn't maybe feel as tough. They do a good job of sort of disarming people, I think. So I would say from a staff perspective, I've heard nothing but good things about DEI's role so far.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, I mean, what I appreciate is that Pamela has a real strategy and a strategic vision for how to engage people, and it's a ladder of engagement that she opens the door and starts to engage people, and it broadens, and then the word gets around and says, oh, that was actually fun, and more people show up the next one. So she's got this sort of plan going forward, which I've really appreciated.
Thank you.
And myself and a couple other counselors were one of the early ones at the Survival Center. And I loved it. I went away having met people I'd never met in our community and hearing, people's real experiences in life. So and Pamela's manner does just invite people to engage. So thank you.
So thank you. So on that note, I'll say that we're generally trying to host a staff-only workshop opportunity on a monthly basis. I think the staff have really appreciated the ability to learn amongst and with their peers. They feel that that's a safe environment for them. And then we're trying to engage the community in events that are open to the public. And so tomorrow we will actually host another community event on allyship at the Bank Center from 9:30 to 11.
All right, the next question, or the last question, then we'll open up for any other committee questions, is around the DEI director's role in forming and supervising the law enforcement oversight and community law enforcement oversight board and the community safety committees. And is there advocacy for providing stipends for members of these two committees? Is that contemplated in this budget, which I can speak to, and how there's a lack of stipends for other volunteer committees, but specifically with DEI's role with those two committees, can you give an update, Pam? Pamela?
Sure. So an RFP went out about 4 weeks ago for the Law Enforcement Oversight Board. It just closed on Monday of this week. So we'll have an opportunity to review the submissions, and hopefully we'll have be able to select someone to do that work. So that Law Enforcement Oversight Committee is not in existence yet. We do anticipate that DEI will work very closely with the consultant if one is hired in the establishment of that committee. And then once it's established, we'll work obviously collaboratively with that board. But the creation of the board is envisioned as one that would be independent. So DEI would not be overseeing the Law Enforcement Oversight Board. It would be a separate entity. And I think I missed a second part.
And then working with the community safety group as well.
Yeah, so we've worked very closely with CRESS. Currently, we've provided some workshops for them on restorative justice practices. Earl and I have attended some events together. That working relationship is excellent. In addition, DEI and CRESS are hoping to share an AmeriCorps intern in the fall, and that intern would work exclusively on youth empowerment programming. So we have an excellent working relationship with CRESS. Mm-hmm.
And then related to stipends, so right now there is a stipend for the CSSJC. It's been coming out of Paul's budget, so it's something that Paul thought was important and therefore funded it. There's no formal budget for committee stipends other than the council and school committee. So if there, whatever comes out of stipends for committees, that would be something we would look to include in a future budget once that's determined.
And I'll just add that we do have a model to review from the city of Burlington or from the, Vermont that we're going to be taking a look at for a way in which to provide the stipends for those committees. Yeah.
Okay. So are there any other questions for Pamela? I'll say just as an update, and again, you'll get a broader update. We are funding the consultant position that Pamela described through ARPA. We had a community engagement bucket that we didn't end up spending all of the funding on ambassadors and that program. And so knowing that that work had to start soon, that was something that's being funded through ARPA. And it's a one-time cost, so we thought it fit the criteria of what we were trying to do with ARPA. All right, no other questions.
All right.
Pamela, you can go home.
All right.
thank
Have
you,
a good
Pamela.
afternoon.
Thank you, Pamela.
All right.
Oh,
Thanks,
Matt,
Pamela.
wait, Matt,
Bye.
do you have a question before Pamela leaves?
No, not for Pam. Thank you,
Okay.
Pamela.
All
Nice to
right.
see you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Bye.
Sean, I was just wondering about the timing of your ARPA presentation. Will that happen during when do y'all think about doing that?
I think June is what we were sort of, May is a busy month with all these meetings, but I think June is when we're ready to come back. And in that meeting, it'll be a couple things. It'll be sharing information on the programs that have been funded and how those programs are doing, and then laying out a plan and discussing some of the things that Bob raised earlier, some contingency planning, that type of thing.
I think that I'll talk with Lynn about, there's a couple meetings in June. Just choose whatever, we can do it whenever it's best, depending on the agendas of the council.
Right. Well, and whenever you're ready.
So there's nothing in there that will affect this FY24 that we're looking at now.
So the way ARPA, the town manager can direct it. The council has accepted and authorized spending, but Paul has taken the approach of working collaboratively with the council in terms of updating what it's going to be spent on and getting feedback. And so the first round of ARPA originally was about $9 million was sort of the total value of the first round that we worked with the council on. When we come back, some of those things were super successful and we've put more money, we want to put more money into them. Some of them didn't pan out the way we were hoping and we didn't spend the money. And so that money will be part of the next step conversation. And so there are ways that the ARPA money will help FY24, but it's not a funding source for the budget in that way. And what we're really trying to do, again, is stay away from anything that would increase the town's dependency on ARPA in terms of an operating dependency. We're trying to get off of that with regards to the firefighter and EMTs.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think the next department is,
IT.
hold on, let me pull my spreadsheets. IT or is it election? Let's see. Oh, it's Sue. So Sue is here, town clerk. So Odette, thank you for joining. So we have had a few questions.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Sue.
Hi.
All right, so Sue, I'm gonna kind of facilitate and read you the question, then you can just go ahead. So we've seen, and I know you sent some of these to me, but if you could just repeat them. So there's been a decline in passport and passport photos. can you explain why there's been that decline? And then there was a question about, does the public know we provide these services? But your answer is going to be, we don't provide these services.
Right, right, pretty much, yes. So exactly. So when COVID hit, we got out of the program because the town hall closed. So obviously we can't accept passport applications if we're not here. We have not gotten back into the program at this point. And passport applications and passport photos kind of went hand in hand. When people would come in to apply for a passport, they'd say, "Oh, and do you take pictures?" So, so just to keep in mind, you know, if we were to advertise that we do photos, I just want to caution our camera. I looked up, we purchased it in August of 2007. It's quite old. It takes kind of a crappy picture. So I would say that if we were to get back into this, we would have to purchase a new system for taking photos. And so that's that part of it. So that would explain why we're not taking any money in, because we're not doing them. And I think that answered all of it.
Sue, wasn't there a logistical challenge as well with the having to separate the photos from the applications?
No, actually, the logistical challenge was in the fact that as a town clerk or an assistant town clerk, we are federally restricted from accepting a passport application because we can issue a birth certificate and there might be fraud. Yeah, we had to divide and conquer in our office. So we had one person that could accept passports and that was it. So that created a logistical nightmare, so to speak, because if they're on vacation, you know, how do you keep notifying the public that, oh, we're doing them on these days, not on these days, and oh, they're not in this day, they're out that, you know. So, I mean, we worked best through it while we were doing it, but when COVID hit and it stopped, we haven't picked it up since.
Yep, thank you. All right, the next question is, not sure exactly what this is. So there's been an increase in notarizations. Do you think that's due to the loss of other entities providing notarization services in the area? And do we charge a fee for notarization?
Yes, we charge $5 per notarization. We did see a huge increase. I think it went from like 90 something to what was it, 1,200, something like that. It was huge. So one of the reasons is definitely that Hastings closed because we know they had a notary on staff. Yeah, Kathy shaking her head, nodding her head. And they actually were charging $15 a notarization way back when, and we were still at $5. And so, and we also hear from clients when they come in and they say, yeah, we went to the bank first, but there's nobody on staff today or what have you, they were busy. So I would like to increase that fee to $10. I think it's warranted. I'm hoping it will lower the the traffic at the counter because we spend an awful lot of time at the counter doing notarizations and it takes away from the work that we actually have to do. So, but at the same time, increasing it to 10 from 5, it's doubling it. And I think we're going to still be ahead of the game in the end.
Yeah, and this
So,
is one of the
yeah.
few fee increases that have been requested other than ones that are planned. And I think, Paul, you've already given the green light on this one in particular. So,
Yeah.
Kathy?
I just want to say, Sue, it's an incredible welcoming public benefit that you're doing. So I realize it's a burden on you, but when the bank says you can go across the street and the town hall does it, people go, really? The town hall provides that service? I mean, it's just a nice, there, and as you said, Hastings doesn't do it. The bank says, go somewhere else. So, the increase is enormous, but I think getting known for the fact that we do things for people is a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. And what's interesting lately is that we've been getting a lot of walk-ins for real estate closings, and we absolutely cannot do real estate closings by law. So we've had to turn a few people away. I don't know why all of a sudden there's the rise in real estate closings, but yeah, no, we're happy to do them. It's just when you're standing when my management assistant's at the counter for 4 hours out of 7.5 hours with just notarizations, it's like, okay. So, but
Good. And the last question is a very smooth transition to the new districts, polling, and we use the new machines. Were there any issues from your perspective from the last election?
None. I mean, well, I shouldn't say none. I would say 1%. There's the most common comment we were hearing was the voter didn't see the green check mark that said that their ballot was cast before they walked out of the polling place. And, they were told by the person standing at the ballot box, when you see that green check mark, your ballot's been counted. And either they looked away the second that check mark appeared and missed it. So there was a little bit of, well, wait a minute, how do I know? So I think a little bit more training for the poll workers to make sure that the voter is watching that machine as they're putting the ballot in and not looking away. That's the only thing I can think of. But other than that, it was extremely smooth. The tabulators look very much like the old tabulator, so it's not there wasn't a huge learning curve. We had no problems whatsoever. It was great.
Dorothy?
Yep.
A question that has been raised recently is about with the district changing, particularly old District 3 becoming 4A, and there are 4 sitting councilors in the new district this moment. Will the word incumbent be after all 4 of them?
So I've already been asked that, and I've reached out to the Secretary of State's office. I'm waiting for an answer because I want a definitive answer on that. I've never prepared a ballot post redistricting, so I'm not sure. So I want to make sure we get this right. Yeah, I'll let the counselor that reached out to me know so that they can pass it on.
Well, if we don't like what the Secretary of State says, if some of them get the word incumbent and others don't, there will be some objections. Okay, either everybody gets it or nobody gets it.
Well, we have to follow the law.
Okay,
it's going to be interesting what the answer is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Andy?
Yeah, it's just curious with the elections, then particularly since we just had one, we are getting more people, you noted, on doing mail-in ballots, and whether the time and the cost to process the mail-in ballots is being recouped in any way, or is for purely town elections, is that totally on the town budget? And then the second part to that goes is, have we been getting enough people who are doing mail-in and early voting that we ought to be reconsidering the number of polling locations?
So your first question, Andy, is the mail-in balloting, is it being recovered by the town, the cost? Is that what you asked?
Yes, and how is it a large expense in time and other expense, and are we getting any recovery on it?
So we do get recovery for state elections. We get reimbursed. It's a non-funded mandate. So for the fall elections, we were reimbursed $18,000, but we don't get reimbursed for town costs on mail-in balloting. So this past election, we had the quantity of ballots was really good. I forget what it was. I think 1,500, but we were able to do it in-house without extra help. We were right at the limit of what we could handle, but that was the limit. So there wasn't any additional expense to process them, is what I'm saying. That's not the case for state elections. We get into the 8,000, 6,000 range where we don't have enough time to do them and we have to hire election workers. But again, we get reimbursed for that. And then your second question, I'm not quite sure I understood.
I just was curious because I don't know what kind of difficulty you're having right now at finding election workers. You hear these national stories that is becoming more difficult. I don't know what your local experience is, but is there a point at which so many people are voting by mail and voting early that there's a decline in the polling place that might cause you to recommend that we, as a economic measure, look at reducing the number of polling locations?
Oh, that's interesting. I've never calculated that, but that is a thought. See, the thing is that it's different for town elections than state elections. So I think we would always, Lynn's nodding her head, we would always have the quantity of people coming out, the numbers on state elections where we would need the polls to be in the numbers that they are now, whereas we don't necessarily need that for town elections. I mean, we obviously can't reduce the number of precincts, but if we were to combine a couple of precincts in a couple of locations where we could reduce staff, election worker staff, that would reduce some of the costs. Yeah, I can do an analysis on that and see what the breaking point is. That's very interesting.
Yeah, no, but what you said about the elections that have the larger turnout is definitely something to be considered. But I'll let go to Lynn and Bob, who have their hands up.
National elections are even bigger than state.
Yeah,
And
I'm combining them. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to caution how fast we move into something like this. I think it's good to look at the research, but Kathy can chime in on this. When we looked at potentially having everybody go to the high school, we ran into a buzzsaw, and and frankly, the research didn't support that. People identify with where they vote, and so we might be able to show that it could save some money, but the education related to it needs to be really thought about. And I could go on and say more, but that's all.
Yeah, I maybe I'm a little radical thinking here, but I would be interested in looking at just entirely mail-in ballots for all all elections. I think that when I look at the turnout for local elections, it concerns me that people aren't really paying attention to local elections. And maybe we wouldn't get people returning their ballots. I don't know. And maybe this isn't the time to be thinking about it, but I'm somebody who really thinks that it would be great if we got 70-80% voter turnout for every election. And when I see, some of these numbers here, 13%, 14%, it's not really representative of the residents of the town. So anyway, if we had just vote by mail, understand that you'd have to hire election workers, but we have to, basically have all this infrastructure around, the voting locations. So maybe in the long run, it's cheaper. I don't know.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Yeah. So we have to follow state law. It comes down to what state law tells us we need to do. I love that idea. I think, maybe we'll move towards that someday, but we don't have the liberty to make our own rules. Yeah.
And the rules require that we provide a polling place. I will also just say, and again, I looked at Kathy on this, but in the various times that we went out to inform people about the school project, and then my subsequent conversations with constituents and so forth, there's a real trend among older people of wanting to deliver their ballot personally, either go to the poll or drop it off downtown or go in for early voting. And frankly, that's our consistent vote population is older people. So this may just not be something that's arrived yet. And since it's not allowed by state law, then I think we're not there.
Kathy?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Sue might be able to tell us is 1,500 people asked for mail ballots. Do we know how many actually return them? So you got that opportunity when you said how many people live in your household. Would you like a ballot by mail? Our own experience, not this time because we voted in person early, but we requested a mail ballot and it never arrived. And the seriously bizarre thing was 4 months later, my husband's ballot arrived to someone who lived on another street who happened to know us. So there was some major glitch in the system because they had our address correct, but it never got to us. So we had to sign an affidavit that we weren't going to vote twice because we just never received it. So I don't know what that was, Bob, but it was that first time we could do it. So I just think what Lynn and I encountered, and people said, I requested my mail ballot, but I have a different address now because I moved yesterday, but I know where my polling place is. And, the comfort level was, I'm going to go somewhere to try to vote. To make sure they could vote because their address changed, 2 months ago within Amherst. And these were older people who moved from a home into a different place. So anyway,
Yeah, no, I understand that's always an issue. People will move, 2 weeks before election time. I recognize that, but other states do this, have done it for years, and I think it would be instructive. If we wanted to pursue this, it'd be instructive to look at other states and see how they implemented it in the early years.
Yep.
Andy, maybe one more question on this, and then
Sorry.
I'm just looking at the time. I want to make sure we still have two full departments, and then a few little ones at the end. But Bernie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'll let it go. I'm looking at the clock here in the lower corner of the screen, and we are running.
Okay, and if there's anything anyone really wants to just email it to us, and we'll get a response and get it back to you all. All right, so I think with that, thank you, Sue, for coming and talking to the committee. And again, if anybody has any other questions for Sue, email them in and we'll get them addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Sue.
Bye.
So Sean, you are up next. Sean is our information technology director. Kind of keeps the lifeblood of the town humming along. And so I think we have a few questions for you, Sean. Let me just pull up my list. So Sean, what is the plan to install Wi-Fi in the parks and recreation areas? Will this be phased? And which ones have it now?
Yeah, so I'll start with the last part of the question. None of them have it now. But the good news is it's relatively easy to do. So after we complete the downtown Wi-Fi, now that we have fiber to a lot of our recreation areas, we'll be able to do Wi-Fi, I would expect this summer. We'll be able to do War Memorial Park, War Memorial Pool, Mill River Pool, Groff Park, and then when the bathroom goes in at Kendrick Park, Guilford's going to put a spot there in Conduit, and we'll be able to do Wi-Fi at the new playground at Kendrick Park.
Yeah, Sean has been sneaky under the radar, good at getting grants. And so we have a grant to help with the downtown Wi-Fi. We have a grant to extend the fiber optic network up to the top of, I always get the wrong president, Mount Lincoln.
Yep.
And then also Sean is utilizing some ARPA funds that were part of that first round to expand the network to some of the recreation areas.
Yeah, it works out well because the grants are for Wi-Fi and fiber, and they rely on each other, so makes it easy to spend the money.
Dorothy?
Okay, Sean mentioned the bathroom at Kendrick Park. Now, when we were talking about this, it seems like 2 years ago, Kathy had some research that the bathroom would cost $1 million. I'm really excited about the thought of a bathroom at Kendrick Park. Are there any details that can be shared at this time?
So, Paul, do you want to take this one?
So DPW is handling this. We haven't gone out to bid, I don't think, for it, but we're looking at what they call the Portland Loo type. That's a prefab thing that the space is already outfitted to allow for the installation of it. When they built Kendrick Park, they had envisioned having a bathroom there. So that's all set, ready to go. It's just a matter of getting it out to bid. There's a lot of things on DPW's plates right now, but this is one of those. It's not $1 million though.
No, we allocated it was either 200 or maybe
250, I think.
250 from the American Rescue Plan Act for this. So yeah, it's a priority that DPW is working on.
So is this a self-clean one I'm curious about? Or does it?
We'll have to clean that. They're not, very few of them really actually work, the self-cleaning ones.
I suspected that. Okay, so this is a perfect use of ARPA funds. So thank you very much.
And we haven't settled on the Portland Loo. Some of us have different.
Right, we have to go out to, we have to go out to bid.
Some people really like the aesthetics of the Portland Loo and others do not. So
yeah.
You'll have fast Wi-Fi while you're using it though, so.
All right, next question. Can I assume this means maybe free internet? Can we provide or access to the network? Can we provide to low-income housing or public housing Wi-Fi or internet access?
Yeah, we can. It gets a little more complicated. So Wi-Fi is easy to do anywhere we have something to mount the equipment to, especially if it's something we own and we have fiber going to there or a way of getting a wireless link to there. So downtown's easy. The recreation areas are easy. Doing outdoor areas are much easier. Once you start talking about providing Wi-Fi inside of buildings and inside of buildings that the town doesn't own, it gets a lot more complicated. So if we had specific places we were interested in, we absolutely could look into it. But just putting something outside of a building won't necessarily penetrate the building that well. We ran into this. We had an antenna on the rooftop of the bank center providing Wi-Fi to drawing a blank in Wayland. Yeah, and what we found is that everybody on the south side of the building got internet access, but once you went across the hallway to the north side of the building, we weren't providing internet access on that side. So it came, people were upset about that. So, it gets tricky. It's something we'd be happy to look into, and could get a price on what would be involved, but it can get complicated.
Kathy?
Sean, if we don't have an internal budget for it, with the places we don't, as you said, we have places we own is a little bit easier. Do you know whether CPAC money could be used and call it an upgrade of places we funded in the past that are affordable units? So I'm just thinking that the Comcast rates have gone up a lot, and it's just a question on whether there is some access to a support system if we can get the technical part right, but money is the object. Do we know whether Community Preservation Act money could be used that way? So it may not be a question that needs to be answered now.
Yeah.
So, I was going to say, you're creating a utility at this point in time, because you can't just provide the signal. You also have to support the signal when people have complaints. If your people become dependent on it, you really have to have a utility and staffing to support it. Because it is a utility now for folks, and it's something you can't live without. And we discovered that during COVID. So if we want to go down that road, we really need to develop a pretty robust proposal for how to provide that if we're going to do that for private properties.
Yeah, I think I do think it's a bigger issue. There was a group here talking about that. There was a group in Northampton talking about it. So.
And to your question about CPA, I would have to look into that closer. I don't know if, like in an existing facility, I don't know if just buying Wi-Fi or the access would be allowable. Doesn't seem like it would be, but we can double check. Dorothy?
I personally think that finding some way to do this thing, which is clearly much more complicated than we were thinking, would be one of the best social justice projects that we could do in the town. Before COVID, there were a number of events held around town with the community outreach officers, and I went to a number of them. And one of them outside the big apartments on East Hadley Road, people kept coming up and saying the same thing. We don't have internet. And I thought, wow, the town is putting all this effort and making all kinds of ways to communicate with people, and yet huge segments of people can't communicate with the town since we're doing everything on internet. And I remember a student who was in my grandson's class in grammar school lived a little bit further north, and she and her mother had to go sit in a car in a parking lot outside some public building at night in order for her to do her homework and for her to get the signal. So I just think this would be the best social justice thing we could do, is to make sure that everybody had access and their children had access to the internet. So
Yeah, again, to Paul's point, it's a large project, but it's something I think, Sean, you said when the INET was being put up that, it was being structured in a way for possible down the road. I will say, just in terms of students, I know the library and the schools, they do have hotspot devices that they loan out that have internet access. And I don't know if there's any restrictions on where they have internet access, but they, for the reason you described, that they loan those out. But it doesn't address the larger issue that you described. And then the last question, and Brianna, you may want to weigh in on this one. The website, are there any issues with the website, and have you received any public feedback?
Happy to hop in on that. Hi, everybody. I'm Brianna, Center Communications Director. So we have not had major issues. The thing that's constantly ongoing is working with departments to make sure that their content is up to date and accurate, since we have almost 2,000 web pages, give or take. And last fiscal year, we had about 1.5 million visits to our official website. So it just shows that over time, the traffic has gotten considerable. Big increases, a lot of that can be contributed to a combination of COVID, moving more services online for digital delivery, and through our kind of a solid communication strategy that constantly funnels people back to our site from our other marketing and outreach on social media and otherwise. So regarding feedback, we have a feedback button that is on every single one of our 2,000 plus web pages right at the bottom, website feedback. We, in the last 90 days, got 7 submittals. Most often they are not broad-based, but reporting a broken link on a page or suggesting that something is missing from usually a department page. So we do have a mechanism for anytime feedback from people who are on our site. And the other piece that we would be looking to do the next time we go into optimizing or updating the website, redesigning it, is working with and creating a small group of potentially community members who could advise us on their user experiences and needs. That's something that didn't happen the last time because we were in the middle of COVID when we did the last update. So we'd be looking to do that the next time that we made enhancements. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but did that cover?
Matt?
Actually, it's not a question, Brianna. I just want to thank you. You've been really great with some of the communications, press release type things that we've done. But Andy, I do have to leave at 3. I apologize.
Okay, well, thank you.
Kathy?
Mine is just a comment, Brianna. I think you've been amazing. Amazing, and your whole team with Sean too, you're very responsive. So the building committee, the elementary school, as we've morphed into multiple subcommittees, suddenly we've got website, a place to put everything. And it was such quick turnaround, and you work with different staff, and they said, Brianna showed me how to do this. So just thank, and then updating our outside webpage. It was just, you probably don't get patted on the back often enough, but you should. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Shane.
Any other questions for information technology? I will say one of our costs that has almost become like utilities, and Sean knows this, is our software costs. We become so dependent on software, and it's just hard to ever transition away from some of our softwares that we're sort of become bound to these annual increases, which seem like they just go up 5% a year regardless. I know Munis is the one I use. It's an expensive one. Our whole accounting system is Munis. And we asked our rep this just on Wednesday, like, why does it go up every year, 5% every year? Like, you're not adding, new features, like that kind of stuff. It's just but it is just one of those steady, consistent cost drivers that we see every year. And it's a pretty large budget overall for software when you look at all the different departments. It all comes out of Sean's IT budget, so it's all managed in one place. And we look at it, and that's one of the areas, one of the first things we do with the budget every year is we review the software lists for sort of creep. It's easy for there to be creep with software. And sometimes this comes from maybe council requests or public requests or various entities wanting to see different types of information. And there's almost always a software that can do it, but it comes down to is it worth it, and do we want to pay the annual fee? Everything is software as a service nowadays. So if you don't pay the annual fee, you don't get this access to the software. So we do review that every year. All right. Thank you, Sean.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Brianna. All right. So next up is Jeremiah, who's in the council, the backup room there behind the council. Is that where you are?
It looks like he's in a cathedral.
Yes, I am in the back room of the town meeting room.
So I've got a few questions. So Jeremiah is our facilities manager. Really is in charge of the day-to-day with everything with our facilities and does a good job keeping things running. So the first question, Jeremiah.
Poorly written.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to. I think this related to the capital facility funds, sort of the bucket for maintenance, or not maintenance, but sort of the smaller capital type improvements. How has that been working to have sort of one pool to address multiple types of projects?
I think it's been working very well to have that one sort of big bucket to take care of. What it's allowed me to do is when I'm approaching maybe one capital project, and in doing so, I see that there could be other work that's done, or we might be able to do other work cheaper because say the walls are open, that I take care of it at that same time. So we have these, these projects that have come, and we see them on our larger 10-year capital plan, but I can piggyback off of those with that funding. It's also helped for some increases, and then unfortunately, like Sean has mentioned, we're seeing a lot of increases in costs for buildings. So some projects that were $10,000 or $15,000, 5 years ago are 60 now. So try to account for them as best as possible.
Thank you. Can you speak a little bit to how you coordinate with facility staff at the schools like Rupert, and how you coordinate with Sustainability Director Stephanie Ciccarello?
Yeah, so as far as working with Stephanie, our desks are right next to one another. So we are collaborating and communicating almost daily when we're with each other. And we come together. I'll have questions for her. She has questions for me. And so I think right there we have a good rapport and that sort of close relationship. As far as the schools, there is a number of facilities items that do overlap. And when we do have that overlap, I'm reaching out to Ben, I'm reaching out to Rupert, and then we have those collaborative and sort of collective conversations and try to figure out, how best approach it. I would say one of the particulars that we tend to collaborate a lot with is elections. That's where we really come together. But has there been other collaboration beyond that, just regular facilities? Absolutely. And then that's a relationship that will continue to grow, and I'll continue to foster.
Thank you. Okay. So go ahead, Kathy.
So Sean, when I sent these in, somehow my hands typed a whole section on the page 111 on some of the utility bills.
Yeah, I was going to go to those next, but if.
Okay. So I was just going to let you know it's in the wrong place. It was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I figured it out, but thank you. All right, so we're going to go to that section now, Kathy. So utility use, on the facility department page, there's a chart that shows the trend in electricity use, and it kind of goes down and then comes back up. Jeremiah, feel free to weigh in, but from where I, sort of my end of it, when we look at bills, it seems like it sort of trends with the pandemic, which makes sense intuitively to us. It drops off for FY20 and FY21, and then comes back up for FY22. And I'll give you one sort of specific example. The Musanti Health Center wasn't operating very much at all during the pandemic, and now they're back in full force. And we've seen electricity go up at the Bank Center. We've also seen the water. There's a question about the water use going up. And we think specifically the water is a big one there as well. And then again, we collect, that's one of the reasons why we collect an annual rent payment to offset that.
Yeah, the electricity is a tough one. I mean, we're always making or taking measures to reduce our usage, say, with lighting projects and such. But we're taking those measures, but we also have electrical infrastructure that's also starting to age. So as equipment gets older, as motors get older, the demand for electricity, their usage is going to increase, and it's very small amounts, but it almost just keeps the scales in balance in a way of that upward slight upward trend, unless like very large changes are made. We should see that upward trend. What I'd like to try to do is stabilize it so we don't have these huge spikes. One of the big spikes, like Sean had mentioned, is water. Water was that was a big one. Yeah, that went from, it probably increased 200 to 300%, I would say. And so that one was a little bit of an alarming. Say, what is causing this? And really, it was a good service. We're all of those dental services and the health services that are in that Musanti space is the driver, and that's a good thing. Yeah, to have that.
Jeremiah, can you list off a few of the locations where you're currently either planning or actively working on HVAC project that will increase efficiency?
Yep. So 2 right now at the Amherst Police Department. One is to replace an aged cooling system, and that's for their telecommunication rooms. That is just about ready to go out to bid. Another is we just contracted with mechanical engineers, some designers, to help us with the chiller replacement over at APD, and that chiller hopefully will be a heat pump chiller, so that will provide heating on all those swing seasons and when it's a little bit mild outside, but also the cooling, so that we're burning much less fossil fuels. We also had the UMass students do an assessment of the town hall building, and I got to sit through their presentation on Tuesday of this week and hear how what they proposed for the town, for town hall, to electrify our heating system here and get off of fossil fuels. So I would say those 3 are probably the ones that are closest in my sights. And the next one would be the Munson Memorial Library.
Jeremiah, in terms of our electricity consumption, as we move systems off of natural gas or heating oil and onto fully electric systems, do you expect our electricity consumption to rise, or will these new systems be so much more efficient even with their electricity use that we won't notice an impact?
Yes, absolutely, they are going to rise.
Okay.
So some of these have some type of electrical resistors in them that might be generating heat. Stuff like that will drive up that electrical usage. We have to understand those where we might be, we'll be saving money on fossil fuel side. So either on gas or the home heating fuels, the number 2 oil, we're eliminating that piece. So really those kind of funds would transfer over to electric.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that to caution that when we do this, we might not necessarily see the savings. It will just transition to a different bucket because electricity prices have gone up, as you all know, as fast as anything has gone up.
Yep.
And our electricity in this area is driven by natural gas. So, or, produced largely with natural gas. So it's not going to necessarily be a cost saver as we do this, but obviously it's consistent with the town's goals.
But we will get there though. I mean, with all of the work that's being done and all of the assessments that we're doing with solar and solar projects and those solar arrays, that's how we offset the increases in electric.
Kathy?
That was going to be my question on, we've got solar on the landfill and to the extent we can be offsetting it. It wasn't clear to me the other day, Sean, when we were with the elementary school building on sustainability, but I think our new building may generate a surplus with the panels. They're not doing it just a very narrow. So if we can capture it in other buildings where we generate more renewable that we actually use, so when we start to look at other buildings, we should be thinking that way. If we have buildings and parking lots, that it's a pooled resource.
Kathy, are you offering to explain to this group what a teddy is?
No,
okay.
No, there's a whole new state building code that completely affects our building. And it changes the names of everything. So it's got a new acronym, but it will increase the cost of the envelope of the building. And I think this is coming in for private buildings as well. It's not just public buildings. So the first reaction to this, Jeremiah, just so you know, was a gasp of the energy model because we could not achieve their targets. So they had to change their code because, so it's not a small change. It's a big change. Yeah.
Kathy, to your point though, on solar, so we have few, if any, behind the meter solar systems where you really get the benefit of solar. Again, we have like the landfill is great, but it's an off-taker, type arrangement where, we send the money back to the grid and then we get a credit, which is not as financially advantageous as if we actually have the solar mounted on a building and feeding the electricity directly. So I think that's the area we've got to look to expand in the future. And we had that study done of municipal facilities. So we've got the data. But I think that's our next step, is to look at more of the behind the meter type systems that's actually powering the building. Lynn?
And the irony is that the highest production is going to be when school's not in session. Because the summer months.
Over the summer, yeah.
Right.
No,
So
the schools were the best. The schools were the big, from a return on investment, those were the high school and middle school were the best locations.
That's when my electric bill goes to zero in the summer.
Well, but the school, because we're going to own them rather than having to do it through a third party, will be accumulating that, whatever we call it behind, but the way our house works,
you can pass those credits on. I think you can transfer those types of credits, and those might be a little more advantageous than
to a building that's being more used, that maybe the air conditioning's on in the summer or something. Just
right. I think that, or no, there's might be a couple other questions here. We talked about water. Do we offset electric use costs with landfill solar fields production? And again, we do, but it's not a direct offset. It's we get a penny savings per kilowatt hour, essentially, is what we get on the electricity billing side. And again, there were other financial benefits that we discussed during the enterprise fund piece of it, but in terms of the electric cost, it's a penny savings per kilowatt hour, which is about $30,000 a year or so. And is there a table with costs for line items on page 11, electric, gas, oil, water, sewer? Kathy, do you know?
Yeah, well, so on page 111, it showed the kilowatt hours and the gallons, but I didn't know whether we had something that said these kilowatt hours translate to this amount of dollars.
Just like a total budget for electricity?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could provide that. Yeah, we can add that.
And I know you did it in JCPC, but I was just, that, so it bounces around, but meanwhile, the price for those has been going up. So just so
Yeah,
Should
no,
we-
that's a huge one of the areas that we've seen grow tremendously in this past year, especially as the rates went up over the winter. And we're hoping to actually potentially lock in rates now to bring it back down, because rates are actually, they've sort of dropped back off a little bit since the winter.
And then if Musanti is a major source, if water went from 31,000 cubic feet to 95, so Jeremiah, you already said it tripled, but do we charge Musanti for the water use? Does that become a bill or part of their rent?
I don't believe they pay for it separately. It's one of the things they pay rent for.
But is the rent adjusted to reflect the fact that
There's an
our water rate,
annual, it does,
our water rates are going up? And
yeah,
if you're a home, you tripled your water use, you would see it in a bill.
yeah. So their rate, the history was, they had sort of a lower rate as they were kind of getting started, and then it's escalated up to be more in line with sort of market rates in the area. And it does have an annual increase of 2.5 or 3% that it goes up every year. And it's a license agreement, so we can adjust it annually as needed.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I think that's it for facilities. Any other facility questions? Oh, there's one more actually. And Jeremiah, we talked about this a little bit. Is there a facilities management plan in place?
Yeah, so all life safety equipment or systems have contracted services just to ensure that they meet regulatory standard. Beyond that, I've developed and continue to develop facilities preventive maintenance programs. This is done through like policies and procedures, checklists that it includes supplies, tools, and all of these items like that. So staff can look at them. They'll come up in my tasks. So I use our Outlook and the software that IT provides, and we get those tasks, those reminders, those come up. We couple that with a checklist, and then we take care of those particular preventive maintenance items. So we do.
Thank you. Any final questions for facilities? Good. All right, you're off the hook, Jeremiah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a few more sections, but they're not really departments, so I'll just run through them quickly. So we have the employee benefit section, which we touched on a little bit. So we break out all our health insurance benefits, life insurance, that kind of thing. The other thing that's in that section is our contingency for the outcome of collective bargaining. And right now there is some money in there because we have a few unsettled, we have some unsettled contracts. So just note that there isn't always money in there for that, but when we have a year like this where we're in between contracts, we do budget that money there. All right, then there was a question, health insurance projected increase by 8% in FY24. But let me just go to.
Yeah, that was mine when I looked at the.
Yeah, why it's only a 1.5% increase.
The total only went up by a certain amount, but the projection was a lot more. And then I thought, well, maybe it's because there was a shift in the composition of the contracts. But when I looked at the contracts, it didn't look, like, is there more family contracts? And I didn't see it. So it was just purely, I didn't understand the math.
Yeah, so the 8%, that's only for active health insurance. So that's one thing. It's not all health insurances. So like I was saying, for retiree, those increases have been much less, and it's a little bit, the timing is a little bit different for retiree health insurance versus active. So active goes by a fiscal year. Our retiree, because it's Medicare, goes by a calendar year. But we know for the calendar year, 2023 through December, we know our Medicare rates. And so we only really have to project an increase for half the year each year. But those Medicare rates have been very advantageous. And then I think I know the answer to the other piece. Sorry, I didn't get to this before the meeting. I think the other reason why it didn't go up as much is because we aren't budgeting as much of a contingency because we have some of our contracts settled for next year. But let me just confirm that real quick.
You know, if it's just a math issue, I just didn't understand how it.
Why it's not going up 8% or and the
No,
other thing
I was
the other thing-
perfectly happy with 1.5%. I mean, I didn't have a quibble with it.
the other thing we do is we do adjust our health insurance enrollment each year. So it could be sometimes if there's fewer plans, that helps alleviate some of that. But
Right.
hold on.
It's kind of a techie question, Sean, so we don't need to take everyone's time. You know,
Those are my favorite questions. Yeah, I think one of the, I think our budgetary control, again, which is used for the outcome negotiations, is about half as much as it was in FY23, and we have about half as many open contracts. So, so that's why that went down, which offset some of the health insurance increase.
Okay.
We talked about, can we show benefits sort of by department or by operating budget, but all in one place. And yeah, we'll get something together for that before next year. Yeah, and there was another question about health insurance being separate from pensions. And again, that's just a structural decision that was made a while ago. It's helpful to operating budgets because they don't have to absorb I think I'm assuming one of the reasons why it was done is because pensions had a pretty large annual increase, and trying to help the operating budgets not have to absorb that each year. But and there were a few more. Let's see.
Yeah, I think you answered most of.
Is that all of them? Okay.
Yeah, no, and it's the same good thing that Bob said, you know, that where's pensions? And then you leaf through and you can find pensions someplace, and where's
Right.
health insurance, and go, these are pretty big numbers. And if we've been looking at the whole school budget without them, there's
Right.
a big piece missing each
Right.
time.
And when you do get, when we look at state reports for per pupil spending and things like that, all that does get rolled in to that number. So the per pupil spending numbers for the schools, we give them a pension number every year that reflects their share. So that number is an all-in number. So the only other thing I'll just say, just so you guys can say you just reviewed every department. The other couple areas were general services. So general services is the section of our budget that manages our legal services, our audit fees, our OPEB actuarial fees. And then it also is where we pay some of our across the board, like copier, printer type things that help all departments. And then the last one, I think it's the last one, is the, hold on, I'm scrolling through our budget. Oh, the other assessments in OPEB. So again, that's where state assessments, where we show our state assessments, where OPEB contributions are. That section, it's page 204 is where it starts. That's where you can see the pension number, our OPEB contribution number, and then any of our state assessments. I think and then there is a debt and interest section as well. The section before that, we show you what we're budgeting for debt payments for the upcoming year from the general fund. I think that's it. Any questions on any of those sections?
Yes, I had one, and that is we used to have the legal services in a separate section altogether, which then gave the ability to track annually whether there were shifts and how big the shifts were in that particular line item. Are there any trends in that are now hidden from us because it's lumped in with the larger? Not saying that they're hidden from us, but they're not reported to us.
Yeah, well, not hidden, but I'm just looking at, so there's a couple different areas where legal services show up. So human resources, they show up. It's largely to support collective bargaining. And so we expect this year and until negotiations are settled, that we'll see a little bit higher costs in those areas. And again, that'll be when we have ongoing negotiations, they'll go up a little bit, and when we have settled contracts, they'll come back down. And then the more general legal line, let me just take a look at the spreadsheet here. Yeah, so I think maybe they went up in FY22. We had some different legal issues going on in FY22, some of which you probably all remember, related to the library project. And there's been other things that's been used for. So I think the best way, Andy, to address your question is, we can probably Paul can do some sort of annual update or something that describes sort of the trend over time. I know that's always a question, is sort of use of legal services. So the good news is, at least my experience, I haven't had experience with many different places, but relative to the schools, is that the town has a pretty preferential rate with KP Law. The rate's been much lower than what I've seen in other places. And, they don't, we have this retainer agreement where, they don't kind of nickel and dime you for everything you send to them, which is nice as well.
Yeah, I think about it because when we had a conversation earlier in the day about the council being conscious of things that they are doing and asking for, and recognizing that the financial consequences, and this is another area that can have that overflow, and because we don't show it, it doesn't make our counselors as conscious of it.
Yeah, that's why it might be good to have an annual. So just for your information, so in FY20 we spent 54,000. In FY21 we spent 67,000. Our budget has been about 110,000 for those years. So those years were low years, but in FY22 it went up to 158. So FY22 again was a high year. And then we'll see this in the 23. I can give an update on this in the third quarter report where it's at for this year.
Okay. So there seems to have been a failure in our planning mechanism, because I guess we don't have C&D today.
Yeah, no, I don't know why they got added today. Must have been miscommunication. They were planned for Tuesday. Because I didn't think that we would have time to get to them today.
It's been on the consolidated planning calendar that way, that it be today for a long time, and it just got missed between all of us, that there was this disconnect. The important thing is that Athena's not here, and we need to make sure that the posting is correct.
Yeah, I emailed Athena before this meeting because I'm sorry, I must not have been comparing my version to your version, because I was always planning on C&D going next Tuesday, or this coming Tuesday. So I think it was just my error not updating you on that. But Dave and his group, they're planning on Tuesday, and I let Athena know, so she's updated the posting.
So she has the posting correct for Tuesday.
I'll check and see if she's made the update, but I emailed her before the meeting.
If not, as soon as you get off, because
I can check it right now and just see if it's been updated yet. But yeah, so Tuesday will be planning, conservation, which will include sustainability, and inspections, and then we'll also have fire, EMS, and public health.
you've looked at the actual, one of us needs to look at the actual posting, because we're talking about hours really before she would have to get that corrected if it's not posted correctly.
Yeah, hold on, I'm just pulling it up right now. Yep, she's updated it. So it's public health, fire, EMS, and conservation development.
Good. Sorry to bore everybody with this detail, except I had to. And Bernie, I think I know what you're going to ask, but go ahead.
I'm not going to ask anything. I need to. My apologies to everyone. I need to leave. I've got another appointment coming up. So
yeah, well, we're about to adjourn, the question that you had asked me in an email during the meeting, I do think we need to straighten out too, which is to make sure that we have, because I had sent out way at the beginning a list of departments and make sure that everybody's got the right departments. I'll just resend that.
Yeah, I haven't received any questions for conservation and development, so I don't know who offhand was assigned there, but
Well, thank you all. We'll see you on
Yeah,
Tuesday.
I won't do it in an open meeting, but I think there may have been some confusion.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything else that they want to raise as unrecognized, unanticipated business? Because otherwise, I'm just going to comment on next meetings a little bit and then adjourn. And I'm going to try and see what we can do to get caught up on a bunch of minutes for Tuesday's meeting, but make them go quick, so that if I come up with any changes, I'll send them in advance. And was working with Athena a little bit on seeing if we could catch up with some more minutes. And the report piece, as you're going through your sections, and I'll make this a part of the memo that I'm sending out on the reminder as to who's in what section, to get straighten out the problem that may exist. To start thinking about what to say for the department that you were assigned to, and then also, if you think that there's an issue that's going to be a particular discussion item for the committee to flag it. I think we'll all do that, but there was one that certainly came up today, and there's one that I've been working on. One that came up a little bit today was when we got somebody again mentioned the whole thing with the police budget and Cress, and that needs, I think that will be one we'll have to spend some time on when we get into the summation meeting. And the other one that I have been working on, because I'm assigned to elementary schools, is I've done some analysis and numbers on the question of the $84,000 that the school department asked for, that's above what the amount allocated in the budget that was proposed by Paul. And that's certainly going to be an issue that we will need to talk about as a separate issue. What we did last year, and I think we'll get to again this year, is generally recognize that we're recommending all departments, and but that we're identifying the ones we want to talk about separately. So it's sort of handled as a trying to identify the ones that need separate discussion, so that everything else gets encompassed in a single motion. Kathy.
Yeah, I see. I'm just looking at your list. I see that I saw May 19th and thought I was general government and it was Bernie. So I've got conservation planning and inspections, and I will get whatever questions I have. I'll get them to you by Monday morning, maybe over the weekend. I know you're been holding your breath. So I just saw May 19th and went for it, but got them. We'll do them.
General government got double duty this year. That's okay.
No, and I'll try to be a little bit more coherent than some of my general government.
Don't worry about it.
It's like you had a couple other things on your plate, Kathy.
So with that said, I don't think that there's anything else for today. I want the minutes to note, so I'll say it out loud so it gets picked up, that I've been checking it several times to make sure that there's no one from the general public who's been here. And I did not call for public comment, not because I didn't think public comment's important. I absolutely do, but there was no public to invite to make comment. So that should be noted in the minutes when we get there. Anything else? If not, I think we're adjourned.
Bye, everyone. Have a
Bye.
happy weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Council's adjourned too.
Bye.